Today I will tell you about the night everything changed. At 2 a.m, my daughter collapsed into my arms, bruised and shaking, whispering the words no mother should ever hear. He betrayed me for his mistress. I stayed silent, holding her close, while my phone lit up again and again with 20 desperate calls I refused to answer. Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss more grandma life stories, where quiet strength meets justice in the most unexpected ways. My name is Linda Carter. For more than 30 years, I have worked as a nurse in a hospital, walking through corridors where life and death stand side by side. My job has trained me to remain calm under pressure, to breathe evenly when chaos erupts, and to make decisions when seconds matter. But nothing in all those years prepared me for the sound of fists pounding against my front door that night. I had just come home from a long night shift, my body aching, my shoes still carrying the scent of antiseptic and fatigue. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet you crave after hours of alarms and hurried footsteps. Yet the silence shattered with a sudden, frantic knock. At first, I thought my exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But then the knocking grew louder, urgent, desperate. When I opened the door, Rachel was there, my only daughter. Her blouse was torn at the shoulder, her hair tangled, and her face marked with a bruise spreading across her cheekbone. Her lips quivered as she tried to speak, but her body gave in first. She fell forward, into my arms, trembling as if her very bones could not hold her upright. I caught her, pulling her close, feeling the way she shook against me. In a broken whisper, she said, "Mom, he betrayed me for his mistress." The words burned hotter than any fever I had ever treated. Behind us, the phone on the table lit up again, the screen glowing in the dim light of the living room. 20 missed calls from Mark, my son-in-law. His name pulsed red across the glass as if it were mocking us. The buzzing would not stop, each vibration rattling against the wooden surface, filling the room with a rhythm that felt like a warning. I did not pick it up. Instead, I tightened my arms around Rachel. She pressed her forehead against my shoulder, her tears dampening the fabric of my scrubs. Her breathing came in jagged gasps, as if every inhale hurt. I wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but I stayed silent. Sometimes silence is the strongest thing you can give, because it holds space for truth to settle. The house seemed suspended in time. The lamp by the couch cast long shadows across the floor, and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen became deafening in the stillness. My daughter's sobs rose and fell like waves against the shore, fragile but relentless. I looked down at her, remembering the nights when she was little and afraid of thunderstorms. Back then, she would crawl into my arms, asking me to make the noise stop. Now she was grown, a woman of 34, but her fear was no smaller, her pain no less raw. And once again, she had come to me for shelter. The phone continued to vibrate, each call more insistent than the last. Mark was out there somewhere, dialing again and again, maybe furious, maybe panicked. But in that moment, he was nothing more than a name flashing on a screen, powerless to enter this house. I let the phone ring. I let him wonder. My silence was my answer. In the stillness of that night, holding my daughter in my arms, I knew that something had shattered. Not just her marriage, not just her trust, but the fragile balance of our family. And as a nurse who had spent decades patching up wounds, I also knew this was one injury no bandage could ever cover. That was the night everything began. The night when 20 missed calls could not drown out the truth whispered at 2 a.m. I remember the night before as clearly as if it had just happened, and now every detail burns like a warning I had ignored. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner at Rachel and Mark's house, nothing extraordinary. I had just finished a long shift at the hospital, exhausted but determined to show up, because my daughter asked me to. She said it would be good for all of us to sit together again. I walked in with a smile, but the air inside their dining room was heavy, like something already broken. The table was set nicely. Rachel had gone out of her way, I could tell. Her hair pulled back, makeup soft, trying to hide the faint stress under her eyes. She wanted everything to look normal. Mark stood at the end of the table, too cheerful, his voice just a little too loud. He carved the roast chicken while pretending to make small jokes. But in his pocket, his phone buzzed constantly. I counted at least 5 times before the food was served. Each time he glanced down quickly, his jaw tightening. Then he plastered a smile back on his face. I sat across from him, watching the small cracks appear. Years in the hospital had taught me to notice things others missed. The tension in someone's shoulders, the flicker in their eyes when they lie. Mark's hands trembled slightly when he reached for the wine bottle. He tried to hide it by laughing at his own story about work, but the laughter came sharp, without warmth. Rachel noticed too. She reached across the table once, touching his arm. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice light, but her eyes searching. Mark pulled back just a fraction and said, "Of course, everything's fine. Just work being demanding." He flashed that polished grin of his. But then the phone buzzed again, and this time he excused himself, slipping away toward the hallway. The silence at the table was uncomfortable. Rachel lowered her gaze to her plate, pushing food around without eating. And then Clara, her so-called best friend, leaned back in her chair with a smirk. "A successful man always has choices," she said, lifting her glass of wine slowly. Her tone was dripping with suggestion, almost daring Rachel to react. Rachel gave a forced laugh, shaking her head. "That's not funny, Clara." "Oh, come on," Clara continued, tilting her head. "It's the truth. Ambitious men attract attention. You should be proud he's wanted." Her words cut sharper than knives. Rachel's smile faltered, but she tried to hide it. She pressed her napkin to her lips, as if wiping away crumbs, though I could see the moisture forming in her eyes. I wanted to speak then, but I didn't. I simply studied Clara. Her eyes glittered in a way that wasn't kind. There was a satisfaction there, like she enjoyed watching Rachel squirm. Mark returned after several minutes, his tie loosened, cheeks flushed. He announced something about a colleague calling him about a late project. He looked at Clara briefly, too briefly for most people to notice, but not for me. The corner of her mouth curved ever so slightly, and I knew then that whatever was happening, she was involved. We ate in uneasy quiet. Rachel tried to spark conversations, asking about my work at the hospital or Clara's weekend plans, but every answer circled back to Mark. Clara mentioned how Mark was moving up fast at his firm. She described how some women at events couldn't keep their eyes off him. Rachel laughed weakly, trying to play along, but her hands fidgeted with her fork. I said little, but I watched. I saw how Mark avoided Rachel's touch, how he leaned away from her when she brushed against his arm. I noticed the way Clara's gaze lingered on him a second too long, her compliments aimed at his ambition, not at Rachel's effort or warmth. After dessert, Rachel brought out coffee. Her hands shook slightly as she poured. She looked tired, like she had been holding her breath all evening. She kept glancing at Mark, as if waiting for him to give her reassurance, but he only sipped his coffee distractedly, one hand always near his buzzing phone. Finally, Rachel asked, "Mark, can't you just put it away for one night?" He sighed heavily, setting the cup down with more force than necessary. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." Clara chuckled softly, leaning toward Rachel. "Let him be. You don't want to suffocate a man like that." Rachel blinked rapidly, her lips pressed together to keep from responding. She only said, "Of course," and turned her eyes away. I sat there, tasting bitterness in my mouth that had nothing to do with the coffee. I knew manipulation when I saw it. I had seen families collapse in hospital waiting rooms, husbands slipping rings off their fingers, wives hiding bruises under long sleeves. I knew the signs, and I felt those same signs circling around my daughter's life that night. When I left their house, the cool night air hit me hard. I remember thinking how strange it was that a dinner meant to bring family together had left me with an ache in my chest. I didn't say anything to Rachel then. I only hugged her and whispered, "Take care of yourself." Her eyes lingered on mine, as if she wanted to confess something but couldn't. Now, standing in my living room with her bruised and broken in my arms, I realized all those details were not coincidences. They were warnings. Clara's smug comments, Mark's endless phone calls, Rachel's forced laughter. The entire evening had been rehearsed like a script, written to keep appearances while the truth rotted underneath. It wasn't concern for family, it wasn't ambition for a better future. It was deception, carefully staged. A performance where my daughter played the role of dutiful wife, Mark the ambitious husband, and Clara the loyal friend. But beneath it, I now saw what it really was. A betrayal already in motion, a plan unfolding right in front of me, and I had sat quietly at their table, watching it play out. That night's memory returned to me with a sting. The signs had been there, but I had dismissed them. Now, holding Rachel, I knew better. Every smile had been fake, every joke hollow, every word designed to blind her. They had been preparing this moment long before the bruises, long before the collapse at 2 a.m. Rachel's body trembled against mine, as if the strength had been drained out of her. For a long moment, she only cried into my shoulder, each sob cutting through the silence of the room. I held her tighter, the way I used to when she was a child afraid of storms. Finally, she lifted her head, her face streaked with tears, her lips trembling as she tried to form words. "Mom," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "He's been seeing someone, a woman from his office. It's not new. It's been going on for months." Her confession hit me like cold steel. Months. Not a slip, not a mistake of a night, but a betrayal carved out of time, repeated over and over while Rachel cooked dinners, folded laundry, and pretended her marriage was intact. I could feel her shame pressing down on her as if she were the one guilty, not him. She pressed her hands together as if praying, her nails biting into her skin. "I confronted him last night," she said. "I asked him straight to his face. I told him I knew the late meetings were lies, that the messages he hid were not about business. I thought he would admit it, maybe even apologize. But he didn't. Her voice broke. I stroked her hair gently, urging her to continue. "He got angry," she said at last, her words spilling out faster now. "He pushed me against the counter. I hit my arm. Then he slapped me. He told me I was pathetic, that I was replaceable, that she understood him better than I ever could." She covered her face with both hands as though she could hide from the memory. The bruise on her cheek was not just an accident. It was proof. It was a scar, written in purple across her skin. I had patched up too many battered patients in emergency rooms not to recognize the truth. My jaw tightened, but I kept my silence. Rachel shook her head violently, as though rejecting her own words. "I should have left right then, but I didn't. I froze. I kept thinking about the mortgage, the bills, the way I don't even have a steady job anymore. He provides everything. What would I do? Where would I go?" She looked at me then, her eyes desperate, begging for answers I couldn't hand her like a prescription. "I hate him, Mom. I hate what he's done. But at the same time, I don't know how to survive without him." Her voice cracked, raw and broken. My chest burned with fury, but my hands remained steady as I held her tighter. I could not collapse with her. She needed my strength, not my anger. The phone lit up again on the table, the glow flashing across the wall like a siren. 20 missed calls. Each vibration was a reminder that Mark still thought he had control, that he believed his voice could command her back into silence. I let it ring, unmoved. Rachel's breathing came in uneven bursts. She dug her nails into her palms. "He said I'd regret it if I told anyone, that he could take everything from me. He made me feel small, like I was nothing without him." Her words sliced through me. This was not just betrayal of marriage vows. This was deliberate cruelty, the kind of poison that breaks a person from the inside. I pulled her back into my arms, this time fiercely, my own eyes narrowing with cold clarity. "Listen to me, Rachel," I said, my voice low and hard. "You are not nothing. You are my daughter. You are stronger than he wants you to believe." She sobbed harder against me, her tears soaking through the fabric of my uniform, still smelling faintly of antiseptic from the hospital. The irony did not escape me. I spent my nights treating strangers, stitching their wounds, while my own child was breaking right in front of me. I thought of the dinner the night before, the smug curve of Clara's smile, the way Mark's phone kept buzzing. None of it was random. The lies had been carefully rehearsed, each performance staged to keep Rachel in her role as the loyal wife. And she had carried that role faithfully until her body finally collapsed under its weight. Rachel pulled back, wiping her face with shaking hands. I wanted to believe he still loved me. I wanted to believe it was just stress, that maybe I was imagining things. But tonight he didn't even try to deny it. He looked me in the eyes and told me she was better for him. Her words echoed in my head. Better. The arrogance of a man who thought he could compare women as though they were items on a shelf. My stomach turned with disgust, but my voice stayed steady. You deserved honesty, I told her. You deserved respect, and you will not find that in him. Rachel's lips quivered, but she nodded slightly, like a fragile leaf in the wind. For the first time, I saw a flicker of realization cross her eyes, the faint awareness that love mixed with cruelty is not love at all. The phone buzzed once more, then stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. I tightened my hold on Rachel. Inside, I felt something harden. The time for ignoring signs was over. The time for silence as a shield was ending. My silence tonight was different. It was not weakness. It was calculation. Because as much as Rachel believed she could not survive without him, I knew better. And as her mother, as a woman who had faced death in hospital corridors and held strangers' hands in their last breaths, I was ready to fight for her. I did not tell her this yet. Instead, I let her lean into me, exhausted, broken, but alive. She needed to feel safe before she could feel strong again. That night, in the dim light of my living room, I made a vow without speaking it aloud. Mark thought he had broken her, but he had no idea who he was truly up against. The phone buzzed again, its glow piercing the dim light of the living room. I didn't move. Rachel lay curled against me on the couch, her breathing shallow, her body heavy with exhaustion. The screen lit up with Mark's name, but this time it wasn't just a missed call. A voicemail icon appeared, blinking like an alarm. Against the quiet hum of the night, the message played automatically. "Linda, open the door. Rachel is exaggerating. We need to talk." His voice was smooth, practiced, laced with the same arrogance he carried at the dinner table. But beneath that tone was something else. Impatience, the sound of a man used to getting what he wanted. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't ask if Rachel was safe. He demanded. I stared at the phone as the words faded, then set it face down on the table. My silence was my answer. Then came the sound that turned my stomach, fists against the front door. Steady at first, then louder, sharper, each knock echoing down the hallway. Rachel stirred, her eyes flying open, panic flashing across her face. "Mom," she whispered, clutching my arm. "He's here." I pressed a hand gently over hers, my voice calm but firm. "Stay still. You're safe." The knocking grew harder, rattling the wood, followed by Mark's muffled shout. "Rachel, open this door. You're embarrassing yourself. Don't let your mother fill your head with nonsense." I rose from the couch, moving silently to the door. I didn't open it. Instead, I slid the deadbolt into place, then the chain. One lock after another, until I heard the solid click that told me this house belonged to us tonight, not to him. The pounding stopped. Silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the floor as I turned back toward Rachel. Her face was pale, her hands twisting the fabric of her sleeve. I sat beside her again, the couch groaning under our weight, and pulled her close. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement outside the window. A shadow shifted against the porch light, the faint outline of a man's shoulders moving slowly across the glass. Mark. He lingered there, his presence pressing against the house like smoke seeping through cracks. Rachel buried her face into my shoulder. "He won't stop," she whispered. My gaze fixed on the shadow beyond the curtain. He wanted me to open the door. He wanted me to confront him on his terms, in his theater of control. But I would not play his game. I had seen this before in patients, in families broken by men who needed power more than they needed love. The louder they demanded, the more they feared losing control. The phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. "Linda, don't make this worse. She's overreacting. We're married. This is between us, not you. Open the door and let's talk like adults." His voice carried a mocking patience, like a doctor explaining something obvious to a child. I felt my jaw tighten. I had spent decades working alongside surgeons, administrators, men who thought authority meant superiority. I had learned long ago how to hear the weakness behind that tone. I placed the phone back down, my silence deliberate. My strength tonight was not in words shouted through doors. It was in the stillness he could not break. Rachel pulled back, her eyes searching mine. "Mom, what if he breaks in?" I brushed her hair back from her damp face, my hand steady. "He won't," I said, "and if he tries, he'll find out this house doesn't belong to him." Outside, the shadow moved again, pacing, circling, the boards of the porch creaking under his weight. The sound of his shoes grinding against the gravel of the walkway scraped at the edges of the night. He was waiting, testing, hoping fear would crack us open. But inside, I sat still. I held Rachel close, my heartbeat steady, my breathing controlled. Another knock, this time softer, like a whisper of threat. Then silence. Rachel flinched at every sound, her body tense, but I kept my arm around her, grounding her with calm she didn't yet have. I wanted her to feel the truth, that his presence could not penetrate these walls, not unless we let him. The phone buzzed once more. "Rachel, I love you. You're confused. Come outside and let's talk. Don't let her poison you against me." Love. That word rolled bitter on his tongue, used not as a gift, but as a leash. My lips pressed into a thin line. I turned the phone off completely, letting the darkness reclaim the room. The buzzing stopped. The house exhaled. Outside, the shadow shifted one last time. Then the crunch of footsteps receded into the night. He was gone, or at least he wanted us to think so. Rachel sagged against me, her tears flowing silently now, exhaustion overtaking fear. I held her tighter, my eyes on the window, my mind sharp. Tonight was only the beginning. His shadow would return. His voice would return, but so would I. In that heavy silence, I understood something clearly. This was not just about Rachel's marriage. This was a battle for control, for dignity, for truth. And as long as I was here, he would not win it. The next morning, as pale light slipped through the blinds, the doorbell rang. Rachel startled awake on the couch beside me, her face still swollen from crying. I rose carefully, motioning for her to stay put. When I opened the door, Clara stood there, her expression painted with concern, her arms already extended as if she had rehearsed the gesture. "Rachel, sweetheart," she said, brushing past me without hesitation. "I came as soon as I heard." Rachel sat up, her eyes wide and uncertain. Clara rushed to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Oh, honey, look at you. You can't just throw away your marriage over one terrible night. Think of the future. Think of all you've built." Her voice was soft, dripping with sympathy, yet the words pierced like barbs. Rachel clung to her, crying again, but I caught the subtle undertone. Clara's comfort wasn't neutral. It was guiding, coaxing, pulling Rachel back toward Mark, even as she shook in fear. I remained near the doorway, arms folded, my eyes steady on Clara. She stroked Rachel's hair and continued, "Men make mistakes. They act out. But you don't want to lose everything over a moment of weakness. You've got a home, a life, plans. Don't let anger ruin what can still be saved." Rachel sniffled, her voice broken. "Clara, he hit me." Clara leaned back slightly, her smile tightening just enough to reveal the strain underneath. "I know, and it's unacceptable. But he was under stress. He didn't mean to. Sometimes people lash out when they feel cornered. You need to give him space, not push him away forever." I stepped closer, my voice sharp. "Space? Is that what you call violence?" "Space is what he'll get when this door stays locked to him." Clara turned to me, her expression smoothing into politeness. Linda, I understand your anger. You're her mother. Of course you want to protect her. But you also know marriage isn't simple. Walking away isn't always the answer. Rachel trembled, caught between us. I saw the conflict in her eyes. Loyalty to a friend who had shared secrets with her for years, and loyalty to herself, a loyalty she barely remembered how to claim. Clara cupped Rachel's face, lowering her voice as if confiding a truth only she could give. Do you really want to start over? Think of how hard it would be. Do you want everyone to see your marriage collapse, or would you rather fix it quietly, rebuild with him, and keep your dignity intact? The words twisted like poison wrapped in honey. They sounded like concern, but the intention was clear. Keep Rachel tethered to Mark, no matter the cost. I watched silently, letting Clara speak, studying every flicker of her expression. Her eyes darted too quickly, her hands gripped Rachel a little too firmly, her voice smoothed too carefully. She was not here just to comfort. She was here to persuade. Rachel's shoulders sagged. I don't know what to do, she murmured. Clara smiled warmly, too warmly. That's why you need me. Let me talk to Mark. I can explain things. He respects me. I'll help him see reason. My jaw tightened. Respect. The word clanged in my ears. I had seen the glance between her and Mark at dinner. Too quick, too knowing. Her presence here now was no coincidence. Rachel, I said, my voice cutting through Clara's sweetness. Remember what you told me last night. He betrayed you for his mistress. He raised his hand against you. Do not let anyone convince you those are mistakes you must accept. Rachel looked at me, then at Clara, her face torn with confusion. Clara's smile faltered for only a moment before she pressed a kiss to Rachel's forehead. You need rest, darling. Don't make big decisions while you're hurting. Just think about what I said. She rose gracefully, brushing her clothes smooth, and turned to me. Linda, I only want what's best for her. You may not see it now, but sometimes saving a marriage requires forgiveness. I held her gaze, unblinking. And sometimes saving a life requires walking away. Her lips curved, polite, but her eyes hardened. Without another word, she left, the door closing softly behind her. Rachel slumped back against the couch, her tears flowing fresh. I sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, my eyes still fixed on the door. Clara's words echoed in my mind, but so did the faint look in her eyes when she mentioned talking to Mark. Concern wasn't her motive. Influence was. The sweetness of her voice, the gentle touch, none of it fooled me. I had heard too many false reassurances in sterile hospital corridors, families convincing themselves everything would be fine when the truth was written in lab results and x-rays. I knew false comfort when I heard it. Clara was not simply a friend. She was part of something larger, a shadow circling the edges of Rachel's life. And for the first time, I saw clearly that Mark was not the only threat pressing at our door. The following morning, the air was heavy but quieter than the night before. Rachel slept on the couch, her face pale, her body curled under a blanket like a child. I sat near her, my mind racing, when the sound of a knock came again. But this time, it was not frantic or violent. It was steady, polite. I opened the door cautiously, and there stood Ethan, our neighbor. He was holding 2 cups of coffee in a cardboard tray. A man in his late 50s, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he carried himself with the calm authority of someone used to weighing words carefully. Ethan had been a lawyer for decades, a man who saw truth not in grand gestures, but in details. "Morning, Linda," he said softly, lowering his voice when he saw Rachel. "I thought you could use this." He handed me a cup, his expression careful, respectful. His gaze lingered on my daughter, and I saw recognition flicker in his eyes at the sight of her bruises. I thanked him quietly, setting the cup on the counter. Rachel stirred, opening her eyes slightly, then turned away, too embarrassed to meet his gaze. Ethan nodded gently, not pressing her, and took a seat near the door as if he didn't want to intrude. After a few moments, he cleared his throat. "I don't want to overstep, Linda, But last week, I saw Mark. It was late, past midnight. He wasn't alone. My heart beat harder, though my face stayed impassive. Not alone? I asked, my voice even. Ethan adjusted his glasses. He was in his car. A young woman sat beside him, not Rachel. They were parked just down the street from my office. I didn't think much of it at first, but the way they leaned toward each other, it wasn't business. Rachel froze on the couch. Her fingers clutched the edge of the blanket tighter, her knuckles turning white. She did not turn around. She didn't need to. His words confirmed everything she had confessed in tears the night before. I kept my gaze on Ethan, my face calm, though inside I felt a fire light up. "Thank you," I said simply. He nodded, his voice softer. "I thought you should know. If you ever need legal advice or just someone who understands the system, don't hesitate." He rose from his chair, gave me a steady look, then stepped toward the door. Before leaving, he added, "You and Rachel are not alone in this. Sometimes knowing the truth is the first weapon." The door closed behind him, and silence settled again. Rachel finally turned her face toward me, tears welling again, but not spilling this time. Her lips trembled. "He's not lying, Mom. That's her. That's the woman." I moved to sit beside her, setting the untouched coffee aside. "You don't need to prove it to me. I believe you." Her chest shook with a long exhale. "But what does it matter? Even if everyone knows, he'll twist it. He'll say it's nothing. He'll make me feel like I imagined all of it." I placed my hand firmly over hers. "Then we make sure he can't twist it anymore." My tone was steady, my face controlled, but in my eyes a light sparked. Ethan's words were not just gossip, they were evidence, a piece of truth that aligned with the signs I had already seen. It meant I wasn't fighting shadows. I had a direction, a thread to pull. Rachel searched my face, her own still clouded with doubt. "Do you really think I can fight him?" "You won't fight him alone," I said, "and he doesn't get to decide what happens next. We do." Rachel leaned against me again, her body tired, but her breathing more even. The fear was still there, but Ethan's revelation had planted something new in both of us, hope. Proof that Mark's mask could crack, that others had seen what he tried so hard to hide. I sat there holding her, my mind already calculating, already sharper. Mark wanted control, Clara wanted influence, but I had something they didn't. Truth, and people who could see it. I would not let that go to waste. It was late, close to midnight, when the pounding returned. This time it wasn't frantic fists. It was measured, deliberate, the kind of knock meant to remind you someone had the power to wait you out. Rachel stiffened on the couch, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. I rose slowly, my eyes on the door, and we both listened. At first, Mark's voice came smooth, almost pleading. "Rachel, please, let's not make this worse. We need to talk." His tone was coated in honey, the same polished charm he used at dinner parties, the same voice that fooled neighbors into believing he was respectable. But even from behind the wood, I could hear the strain beneath it. Rachel's lips parted, and for a moment I saw her falter. She wanted to believe him. Despite the bruises, despite the betrayal, a part of her still clung to the hope that he might change. Her body leaned forward, as though the door itself pulled her in. He knocked again, softer this time. "Rachel, it's me. I love you. Don't let your mother twist things. She doesn't understand what we have." Her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe I should just—" I stepped forward, placing my hand firmly on her shoulder. My voice cut through the air, steady and cold. "Not tonight." She froze, her body trembling under my hand. The wood shook again as his tone shifted. The softness evaporated. "Rachel," he snapped, the words sharp like a whip. "If you walk away now, you'll regret it. Do you hear me? You'll regret it for the rest of your life." The threat lingered, heavy, vibrating through the air. I could almost see it seeping under the doorframe, wrapping itself around her. She curled into herself, shivering. I kept my hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "You're not opening that door," I said, my voice low but unyielding. Outside, Mark's footsteps shifted. He began pacing, the boards of the porch groaning beneath his weight. His shadow stretched long against the curtains, a distorted figure looming in the dim glow of the street lamp. He tried again, his voice rising, each word sharpened with anger. "You think you can hide in there? You think she can protect you from me? Rachel, you are my wife. You belong with me, not in that house, not with her." My chest tightened, but I stayed silent. I knew his type. The more you engaged, the more you fed his fire. So I let the silence hang like a blade. Rachel buried her face in her hands, whispering through tears, "Mom, he won't stop." I leaned closer, my words meant only for her. "Yes, he will. Look at me. He doesn't decide how this night ends. We do." Outside, his voice cracked into something harsher, less controlled. "Rachel, do not walk away from me. If you do, I swear you'll pay for it." The silence that followed was chilling. He stood there for several minutes, breathing audible, as if daring us to respond. But we didn't. We waited. Finally, I heard the crunch of gravel beneath his shoes. His shadow retreated, growing smaller until it disappeared into the darkness. Rachel exhaled shakily, collapsing back against the couch. Tears streaked down her cheeks. He sounded like he meant it, like he'd really hurt me if I don't go back. I sat beside her, pulling her close. "That's exactly why you can't go back. Threats are not love, they're chains, and tonight, you didn't put them on." Her breathing steadied, little by little. The house was quiet again, though the echo of his words still clung to the walls. I stared at the locked door, my jaw set. Mark had shown his true face tonight, pleading one moment, threatening the next. He was dangerous, not just because of what he had done, but because he believed control was his right. As the night deepened and Rachel finally drifted into uneasy sleep, I sat awake beside her, watching the window. Mark thought he had shaken us. He thought his voice could rattle the foundations of this house, but what he didn't know was that his threats had only confirmed the truth. This was war. It was the afternoon after Mark's threats when Clara returned. She came with a basket of muffins, her smile bright, her voice sugary sweet. Rachel was upstairs resting, so I let her in. She placed the basket on the counter, talking casually about how she just wanted to check in. I nodded, saying little, watching her with a calmness I didn't truly feel. When she excused herself to step outside for a quick phone call, I followed quietly to the hallway near the back door. Her voice drifted in from the porch, soft but clear enough for me to hear every syllable. "Mark trusts me more than Rachel," she said, her tone smug, almost playful. "She has no idea how easy it is. Rachel's too weak, too fragile. She could never hold him. That's why he comes to me." I froze, my blood turning cold. The sweetness she had wrapped herself in was nothing more than a mask. Every word she had whispered to Rachel earlier, every gentle pat on the shoulder, every tearful sigh, it was all calculated, all. Clara laughed quietly, the sound slicing through me. "Don't worry, I'll keep her calm. She's so desperate to hold on she'll believe anything I say. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." I gripped the edge of the doorframe, my knuckles pale. My heart pounded, but my face stayed still, my breathing controlled. Years of standing in hospital rooms, of holding steady while chaos swirled around me, had taught me how to stand in silence. And so I stood, rooted in place, letting every poisonous word sink in. Clara's voice dropped lower. "Mark's right. Rachel doesn't deserve him. She's falling apart. He needs someone who understands him, someone stronger. He needs me." For a moment, I closed my eyes, steadying myself. The betrayal was almost too sharp to grasp. This wasn't just a friend choosing the wrong side. This was a woman circling like a vulture, feeding off my daughter's pain, convincing herself she was entitled to what Rachel was losing. Rachel had confided in Clara for years. She had trusted her with secrets, leaned on her in hard times, laughed with her through late-night calls. And Clara had been standing beside her all that time, plotting. The realization made my chest burn with fury. I stepped back, making sure my shadow didn't fall across the porch light. Clara needed to believe she was alone, free to reveal her venom. I wanted her mask intact for now. "Don't rush," Clara said into the phone, her tone soothing, seductive. "She'll come around. Linda thinks she's strong, but even she can't hold Rachel forever. He'll break eventually. He always does." I bit down hard, the anger simmering beneath my skin. She had underestimated me. She thought I was a silent bystander, someone who could be worn down, someone who would eventually hand my daughter back into Mark's grip. She didn't know who she was dealing with. When she finally ended the call and came back inside, her face returned to its perfect mask. She smiled, lifting the basket as though nothing had happened. "I'll leave these here for Rachel. Maybe they'll help her feel a little better." I met her eyes, my own expression calm, unreadable. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. She tilted her head, searching my face, but I gave her nothing. No hint that I had heard her confession, no crack in my composure. She left soon after, her heels clicking lightly against the porch steps, her car engine fading into the distance. The silence that followed was suffocating. I walked back into the kitchen and looked at the basket of muffins, untouched and untrustworthy, sitting on the counter like an offering from an enemy. I thought of Rachel upstairs, resting, unaware that the friend she trusted most had already chosen sides. My jaw tightened as I whispered to myself, "She will know, and when she does, she won't stand alone." That evening, as the house grew darker, I replayed Clara's words in my head. Every line was a dagger, but each dagger was also proof. Proof of who Clara really was. Proof that Rachel's suffering wasn't just at the hands of one man, but sharpened by a so-called friend who stood too close. My anger burned, but beneath it was clarity. Clara believed Rachel was weak. Mark believed he still had control. Both of them believed I was irrelevant. They were wrong. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had already gone cold. The morning light fell across her face, but it did nothing to warm the fear in her eyes. Her phone buzzed on the table, and she flinched as though it were a weapon. Slowly, she turned it over. The screen glowed with a message from Mark. "If you don't come back, you'll regret it. You can't survive without me." Her lips trembled as she read, her shoulders curling inward. I watched her silently from across the room, my arms folded, my face still, but every muscle inside me taut like a wire ready to snap. Another buzz, another message. "Rachel, don't make me angry. You know what happens when I lose patience." She placed the phone down quickly, as though touching it burned her skin. Her breathing grew shallow. At that moment, Clara appeared, stepping lightly into the room with the same false cheer she always carried. She saw Rachel's pale face and immediately draped an arm around her shoulders. "Sweetheart, don't let those words scare you. He's just upset. Men say things they don't mean when they feel threatened." Rachel leaned into her, desperate for comfort, but her eyes still shimmered with tears. "Clara, he hit me. He lied. How can I ever go back?" Clara stroked her hair gently, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "Because you've built a life together. Do you really want to throw that away after one mistake? Everyone deserves a chance to make things right." Rachel shook her head, her voice rising in panic. "It wasn't just one mistake. It's been months. He's been with her for months." Clara sighed, her tone dripping with pity. "I know it hurts, but look at you, Rachel. You're exhausted. You're terrified. Do you really want to start from nothing? Divorce will destroy you. It's ugly. It's public. Everyone will judge. And in the end, you'll be alone." Her words slid like knives under the skin, coated in honey but cutting deep. Rachel's face crumpled, torn between fear of Mark's threats and Clara's poisoned comfort. I remained silent, my eyes locked on Clara. Every syllable she spoke confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't here to protect my daughter. She was here to shepherd her back into his arms, to ensure Mark's grip tightened again. Rachel clutched Clara's hand desperately. "What if he hurts me again?" Clara gave a soft, almost indulgent laugh. "Then you set boundaries. You make him promise. You remind him what's at stake. Men don't change if you abandon them. They change when you stand by them and guide them. My jaw tightened, but I didn't interrupt. I wanted Rachel to hear the contrast clearly, the threat on her phone, the manipulation from her friend, and the silence from me. Because silence in this moment was louder than any argument. The phone buzzed again on the table, louder, insistent. Rachel glanced at it, her fingers twitching as if pulled by an invisible thread. The message preview glared up at us. "Answer me now or I'll come get you." Rachel gasped, her tears spilling over. She buried her face against Clara's shoulder, sobbing, "I can't do this. I don't know what to do." Clara's lips curved slightly, hidden from Rachel's view, but not from mine. "Then stop fighting, darling," she whispered. "Go back. Make peace. It's the only way to end this." The air in the kitchen grew heavy, suffocating. Rachel was caught in a vice. Mark's threats on one side, Clara's poisoned words on the other. Every avenue seemed to push her back toward the very man who had broken her. I sat perfectly still, my face unreadable, but inside, rage coursed through me. They wanted her cornered, dependent, broken. But they underestimated the woman sitting across from them, the woman who had spent her life walking hospital halls, facing death without flinching. Rachel's sobs filled the room, Clara's hand smoothing her hair with rehearsed patience, and Mark's words still flashing on the phone screen. The circle was closing in around her. I looked at my daughter and made a silent vow. She would not be crushed by this, not while I was here. That evening, when Rachel had finally fallen into a restless sleep, I stepped outside. The night air was cool, sharp, carrying with it the scent of rain. I crossed the yard and knocked quietly on Ethan's door. He opened almost immediately, as though he had been expecting me. "Linda," he said, his voice low, serious. "Come in." I followed him into his study, a room lined with bookshelves and files stacked neatly on the desk. The quiet hum of a desk lamp gave the space a sense of focus. Ethan gestured for me to sit, and I did, folding my hands tightly in my lap. "I need more than suspicions," I said directly. "I need proof. If I'm going to protect Rachel, I can't just wait for Mark to make his next move. I have to be ready." Ethan studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I've already started digging. Mark isn't as untouchable as he likes to pretend." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thin folder. "This isn't public, but through colleagues I've learned he's faced complaints at his company, sexual harassment claims. They were quietly settled, buried under non-disclosure agreements, but the pattern is there." My stomach tightened, though I kept my face still. "How recent?" "Within the last 2 years," Ethan replied. "It's no coincidence that he's been careful about his image since. He knows one more scandal could cost him everything." I leaned forward, my voice cold. "Then we make sure the truth sees daylight." Ethan hesitated, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out his phone. He tapped a few times and slid it across the table. On the screen were screenshots, messages exchanged between Mark and a woman whose name I didn't recognize. The words made my jaw clench. "Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you. Rachel suspects something, but she'll never leave. She's too scared." Ethan's eyes hardened as he watched me read. "He's arrogant enough to leave a trail. People like him always are. They believe they're untouchable." I handed the phone back, my voice steady. "Can you send those to me?" He nodded. "I'll email them tonight. But Linda, if you use these, you need to be prepared. Mark will fight back. He won't hesitate to twist the story, to smear Rachel, even to come after you." I straightened in my chair, meeting his gaze head-on. "I've spent my life facing crises in hospital rooms. I've looked death in the eye more times than I can count. Mark is dangerous, yes, but he is not invincible. And he has already underestimated me." Ethan gave a small nod, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Then we'll move carefully, build the case piece by piece." I left his house with the folder in hand, the screenshots already secured in my email. The night felt different as I walked back across the yard. It wasn't lighter, not yet, but the weight pressing down on me had shifted. For the first time since Rachel collapsed into my arms, I wasn't just reacting, I was preparing. Inside, I placed the folder in a locked drawer of my desk. I sat for a long time in the quiet, listening to Rachel's uneven breathing upstairs. My fingers rested on the wood of the drawer, steady, deliberate. Mark thought threats and shadows would keep us silent. Clara thought sweet words could steer Rachel back into his arms. Both of them believed they held the upper hand. But now, I had something they didn't. Proof. Evidence strong enough to shatter their game. I whispered into the stillness, more to myself than anyone else. You came into my house thinking I would stand by while you destroyed my daughter. You were wrong. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't pace, and I didn't weep. I sat in silence, my mind sharpening, every thought focused. The time for fear had passed. Rachel sat at the edge of the bed, her hands twisted together so tightly her knuckles turned white. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, but it did nothing to soften the heaviness in the room. Her eyes were red from crying, her voice hoarse when she finally broke the silence. "I thought I couldn't survive without him," she whispered. Her words carried the weight of years of fear, of compromise, of convincing herself that endurance was the same as love. I moved closer, lowering myself beside her. For a moment, I simply listened, giving her the space to let it out. Rachel pressed her palms into her face, her shoulders trembling. "Mom, he paid the bills. He decided everything. I just followed. I told myself that was enough, that maybe it was better not to ask for more. When he was good, he made me feel like I mattered. But when he wasn't, I felt invisible, worthless. And I believed him when he said no one else would ever want me." Her words cracked, and a sob broke free. I reached for her hand, pulling it gently away from her face. "Rachel," I said firmly, "strength doesn't begin with holding on. It begins when you say enough." She looked at me, her lips trembling. "But what if I'm too late? What if I've already lost myself?" I cupped her face, forcing her to meet my eyes. "You are here. You walked away. That means you haven't lost yourself. You're finding her again." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. "I don't know if I know how to live without him. I've built everything around him, even my fear. It feels like part of me." I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly against my chest. "Fear is not who you are. It's what he put on you. And just like it was put on you, it can be taken off. It won't vanish overnight, but every time you choose yourself, you peel another layer away." She sobbed into my shoulder, her body trembling. "What if I'm not strong enough?" I pressed my cheek against her hair, my voice steady. "Then lean on me until you are. Strength isn't built in silence, it's built in truth. And you've already spoken yours." Her breathing grew uneven, her sobs sharp at first, then softer. Finally, she pulled back, wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. "I'm so ashamed. I let him control everything. I thought love meant sacrifice, even when it hurt, even when it killed pieces of me." I shook my head, my voice low but fierce. "Love is not supposed to break you. Sacrifice for someone who doesn't honor it is not love. It's captivity. And you are not a captive anymore." Rachel's chest rose and fell as she tried to steady herself. She looked at me with eyes that were still uncertain, but for the first time, there was a flicker of something else behind them, resistance. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she whispered. "Then you won't be," I said, "because fear only wins if you bow to it. You've already stood up once. You came to me. That was your first step." Her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. Instead, she leaned into me again, this time not as a child collapsing, but as a woman searching for her own strength. I tightened my hold, my voice steady but calm. "The life you thought you couldn't live without him, it was never real. It was an illusion he built to keep you weak. But the life you can build without him, that's real, Rachel. That's freedom." We sat in silence for a long time, her head against my shoulder, my hand smoothing her hair like I used to when she was a little girl. Outside, the world moved on, cars passing, birds calling, life flowing as it always had. Inside, though, a quiet shift was happening. Rachel wasn't free yet, but she had spoken the words that mattered, her fear, her shame, her doubt, and by speaking them, she loosened their grip. I held her close and whispered one last promise into the stillness. You thought you couldn't survive without him, but I promise you, you'll learn not only to survive, you'll learn to live. The knock on the door was sharp, demanding. I knew that rhythm. It was Mark. Rachel tensed instantly, clutching the edge of the couch cushion like a lifeline. I rose slowly, smoothing my palms over my thighs to steady myself. This was the moment I had been preparing for. I opened the door just enough for my body to block the entrance. Mark stood there, his suit pressed, his face arranged into a mask of calm that didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes darted past me, searching for Rachel. "Linda," he said smoothly, "I'm here to take my wife home. Step aside." I didn't move. My voice was cool. "She's not going anywhere with you tonight." His jaw twitched, the charm cracking just slightly. "This isn't your decision. She's my wife. You've meddled enough." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and pressed play. The room filled with his own voice, loud and venomous. "Rachel, don't make me angry. You know what happens when I lose patience. If you leave, you'll regret it." His face paled. He stepped forward quickly, but I held my ground, raising the phone higher so every word played clearly. Rachel flinched at the sound, but she didn't hide. She stood, her eyes wide but fixed on him. "You don't understand," Mark stammered, his voice slipping into desperation. "It was just... I didn't mean..." Before he could finish, Ethan stepped out from the hallway behind me, calm, deliberate, carrying a slim folder under his arm. "Actually, Mark, you meant every word, and now we have them recorded." Mark's head snapped toward Ethan, his composure unraveling. "This doesn't concern you. You don't know the first thing about my marriage." Ethan opened the folder, pulling out a set of printed documents. "On the contrary, I know quite a bit. Harassment complaints from your company, settlements swept under the rug, and now text messages that prove your affair. If you push this any further, these will be in the hands of a judge before the week is over." For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw Mark hesitate. His confidence faltered, his mouth opening, then closing without words. His hands clenched at his sides, his shoulders tightening as though he was ready to explode. But he couldn't. Not here. Not with proof in front of him. I let the silence stretch, savoring his discomfort. Then I stepped forward, lowering my voice so it cut like steel. "You came here thinking you could scare us into submission. But the moment you raised your hand to my daughter, the game changed. You don't hold the power anymore. We do." Mark's eyes darted to Rachel, searching for weakness, but she stood straighter than before, her body trembling, yes, but her gaze unbroken. She whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "I'm not going back." That single sentence seemed to gut him more than Ethan's folder or my phone. His face contorted, anger and disbelief mixing until his mask cracked completely. He pointed a finger at me, his voice low, dangerous. "You think you've won? This isn't over." I didn't flinch. "It's over when we say it is, and tonight you leave." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Mark exhaled sharply, turning on his heel. His footsteps pounded down the porch steps, his car door slammed, and the engine roared to life before fading into the night. The house fell silent again. Rachel sagged against the couch, her breathing ragged, tears streaming down her face, not from fear this time, but from release. Ethan set the folder on the table, his hand steady on her shoulder. I turned off my phone, sliding it into my pocket. For the first time in weeks, my chest felt lighter. This was only one battle in a longer war, but it was a turning point. The balance of power had shifted, and Mark knew it. I sat beside my daughter, pulling her into my arms. He can threaten, he can posture, but he can't hide from the truth. and the truth is finally on our side. Clara arrived the next afternoon, unannounced as always. She walked into the house with her usual practiced smile, carrying a bag of groceries as though she were doing us a favor. Rachel was sitting at the table, pale but calmer, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Clara placed the bag down with a dramatic sigh. "I thought I'd bring you something," she said, her voice sweet, but her eyes flicked quickly toward me before landing on Rachel. "You look fragile. You really need to take better care of yourself." Rachel tried to thank her, her voice timid, but Clara cut her off. "Honestly, Rachel, you've let this whole thing get so out of hand. Mark has his flaws, sure, but he deserved better than this circus." Rachel's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The air thickened between them. I set my cup down carefully, my eyes narrowing on Clara. She leaned closer to Rachel, her tone sharp, though wrapped in false sympathy. "You were too weak for him. Always running to your mother, always doubting him. Men like Mark need strength beside them, not tears." Rachel flinched as though she'd been struck. Her shoulders hunched, her fingers trembling around the teacup. I rose from my chair, my voice cutting through the room like ice. "Better doesn't mean betrayal," I said coldly. Clara turned to me, her smile faltering. For the first time, her mask cracked, revealing the bitterness beneath. Her eyes burned with something darker: resentment, envy, a need to wound. "You think you're protecting her," Clara snapped. "But all you're doing is keeping her weak. You've coddled her, let her hide behind you. Mark was right. Rachel never stood on her own 2 feet, and now look at her. Pathetic." Rachel's breath caught, her eyes filling with tears. I stepped between them, my body shielding my daughter from the venom Clara spewed. My tone was firm, each word deliberate. "You confuse cruelty with strength. You confuse betrayal with love. That's why you will never understand what it means to stand beside someone without breaking them." Clara's jaw tightened, her nails digging into her palm as she grabbed the strap of her bag. "You'll regret pushing me away," she hissed. "Mark and I, we know what it takes to survive. You're clinging to ideals that don't matter in the real world." I held her gaze, unflinching. "Survival without integrity is nothing but decay. You've chosen your side, Clara, and it isn't ours." The silence stretched for a heartbeat too long. Then Clara gave a bitter laugh, low and sharp. "You'll see. When Rachel runs back to him, you'll realize you wasted your energy. She's not as strong as you think." She turned sharply, her heels striking the floor as she stormed toward the door. Before leaving, she glanced back one last time. Her eyes were filled not with sadness, but with pure resentment, as if our very refusal to break had insulted her. Then she slammed the door behind her. Rachel collapsed against the table, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Mom, she was supposed to be my best friend." I knelt beside her, taking her hands in mine. "Some friends come to comfort, and others come to control. Clara was never here for you. She was here for him, and now you know the truth." Rachel shook her head slowly, her voice barely audible. "How could I have been so blind?" "You weren't blind," I answered softly. "You trusted, and she betrayed that trust. That doesn't make you weak, Rachel. It makes her small." Rachel exhaled shakily, and for the first time since Clara walked in, her shoulders straightened. There was still pain in her eyes, but also the beginning of clarity. She had seen Clara's true face, and once a mask is stripped away, it cannot be put back on. As I held her hands, I felt my resolve deepen. Mark had lost his power. Now Clara had revealed hers was nothing but poison. The circle of manipulation was closing in, but so was the circle of truth. The morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, soft and golden. Rachel stood beside me at the counter, chopping vegetables with a steadiness I hadn't seen in her for months. Her hands still trembled slightly, but when she caught me watching, she smiled, an unforced, delicate smile that lifted the heaviness in the room. "I forgot how good it feels to cook with you, Mom," she said quietly. I handed her a bowl, letting her stir the soup as it simmered. The rhythm of the spoon against the pot was soothing, like a heartbeat. For the first time, Rachel wasn't shrinking into herself. She was present, engaged, rediscovering pieces of the woman she thought she had lost. We set the table together, simple but warm. She laughed softly when she spilled a bit of broth, and the sound startled me. It was so rare, so fragile, yet it carried a promise of return. I didn't tell her, but inside I felt relief. This was what healing looked like, not grand declarations, but quiet moments of reclaiming joy. Later, I stepped outside into the garden. The earth was cool under my gloves as I pressed seeds into the soil. Rachel joined me with a cup of tea, watching as I worked. "You always look so calm out here," she murmured. I looked up at her, because here, nothing lies. The ground gives back what you put in. No manipulation, no betrayal, just truth in its purest form. She nodded, her eyes following the rows of sprouting plants. "I want that for myself too. No more lies." Before I could answer, the phone rang inside. The tone was sharp, cutting into the peace of the morning. I didn't need to see the caller ID to know who it was. Mark. Rachel stiffened, her tea rattling against the saucer. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't answer." But I walked inside and picked it up. His voice poured through, heavy with forced calm. "Linda, listen. This has gone too far. Rachel is exaggerating. She belongs with me. Put her on the phone." I let the silence stretch until his breath grew ragged. Then I said, clear and steady, "Don't call again." He barked my name, his tone slipping from charm to anger. "You think you can cut me out? You're making a mistake. You're going to regret this." My hand didn't tremble. My voice didn't waver. "The only mistake was letting you in as long as we did. This is over, Mark." I lowered the phone back onto the receiver with deliberate calm. It didn't matter what threats came next. His words no longer had weight here. Rachel had followed me in, her eyes wide, tears glistening. "You sounded unshakable," she whispered. I touched her cheek gently. "Strength begins when you stop giving fear a place to live." The house was quiet again, but the silence was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful, full of possibility. Rachel leaned against me, and for the first time in a long while, she wasn't trembling. We returned to the kitchen, the soup still warm, the garden waiting outside. The day stretched ahead of us, not heavy with dread, but alive with choice. And I knew in that moment that we had taken the first true step into freedom. The evening light spread across the porch like a soft blanket. I sat on the wooden chair, a cup of tea warming my hands, the garden stretching before me. From where I sat, I could hear Rachel's laughter drifting across the yard. She stood by the fence, chatting with our neighbor, her posture relaxed, her smile unguarded. The sound of her laughter, real, unforced, was like music I hadn't heard in years. A little girl from next door darted past them, chasing after a red ball. Rachel bent down, her face softening, and handed the toy back. The child giggled, then ran off again. For a fleeting second, I saw in my daughter the spark she had lost. Compassion, gentleness, the kind of strength that rises after you've been broken and pieced yourself back together. I leaned back, letting the chair creak under my weight. A long breath left me, slow and steady, not from exhaustion, but from release. For so long I had carried both of us, her fear, her pain, my anger, my determination. Now I saw her standing on her own, her head lifted, her voice sure. The storm had not vanished, but we were no longer drowning. The phone sat on the table beside me, silent for the first time in weeks. No more missed calls, no more voicemails thick with threats or fake apologies. The absence of noise was its own victory. Rachel glanced toward me, her smile reaching her eyes. "Mom, they invited us to dinner next weekend," she called softly. "Just something casual. I think it could be good." I raised my cup in acknowledgement, pride blooming quietly in my chest. She was making choices, reaching out, weaving new connections. This time, not from desperation, but from strength. I thought of all the words I could say, promises, reassurances, reminders, but none of them were necessary. Our actions had already spoken louder than any vow. She had walked through betrayal and manipulation, through bruises and lies, and now she was learning to walk freely again. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden edge on everything it touched. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth soak in. When I opened them, I saw Rachel helping the little girl tie her shoelace, patience written in every gesture. That was enough. I didn't need grand endings or declarations. What mattered was right here. The sound of her laughter, the calm in my chest, the knowledge that together we had chosen dignity over fear. I set the empty cup down, my gaze steady on the horizon. Whatever came tomorrow, we would face it with the strength we had earned. We didn't need promises, we were already living them. And in that quiet certainty, I felt something rare. Peace, anchored not in words, but in proof.